All right, we have the most winningest coach in NCAA history here, Dave Shoji. He's my former coach, and we are definitely blessed to have him interview for our course. We're just going to be discussing volleyball and Hawaii volleyball culture and give the class an opportunity to learn about him and his legacy in Hawaii. So Dave, welcome. Happy to have you.
I have to correct you though. Russ Rose is the winningest NCAA volleyball coach. I'm the second. Mikowski's the third at UCLA, but Russ just retired, so we're kind of old cowboys, as they say. And you know, I think we're blessed that we were able to stay at our institutions for so long. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So I don't think anybody's going to be winning 1,000 matches at any one institution anyway. But you know, it's a lot different scenario right now for coaches anyway.
Right. Well, you are a Hall of Fame coach too, so that's just an honor in and of itself, right?
Thank you.
I'm blessed to have had Dave as my former coach and one of the most formative coaches that I've had in my volleyball career. And so we're just going to pick his brain over the next, hour or so. And let's just start from the beginning, Dave. So tell me your volleyball story, how it started, and how you got to be one of the winningest coaches in NCAA history.
Well, I took a little strange path to volleyball because in high school, I didn't play volleyball, and I didn't even play volleyball until I got to college. I was a baseball player. I went to UCSB on a baseball scholarship, and I started fooling around with volleyball with my roommates, and we'd go to the beach and bat the ball around. I knew nothing about the sport, although I liked it right away. I took a few PE courses, and the instructor happened to be the coach of the intercollegiate team, and he said, why don't you come out for the team? We'll see if you can contribute to the team. And so I think that was my junior year, my third year in school. And I went out for the team and I made it. I don't know how, but, I was pretty athletic. I wasn't very skilled at the time, but I started playing and I quit baseball to play volleyball full time. And we actually, in my fifth year, we won the national championship. It's not quite what it is today, but it was still a national championship. And that's kind of how I got started in volleyball. It was kind of a different path, but I got there nonetheless.
And so when did you start coaching, and how did that transpire to University of Hawaii?
Well, I returned to Hawaii. I had a brief stint in the Army after college. And then I returned to Hawaii, which was my real home, even though I went to school on the mainland a lot. And I was just kind of looking for a job, and I went back to school at UH, and it was something that passed the time. And I was a basketball kind of guy. I love basketball too. So I started coaching JV stuff, basketball, volleyball, at a couple of local high schools. And all of a sudden, there was an opening at the University of Hawaii. It was actually a club sport at the time. And I was just trying to make ends meet and had 2 or 3 different kind of coaching jobs at the same time. And I'd go from gym to gym. And that's kind of how it started. I think I really wanted to be a coach. I wasn't sure what sport, but it kind of transpired into volleyball. And anyway, the opportunity came to coach the Hawaii women's team. It just became a collegiate sport in 1974. I took over in 1975. It was very Spartan back then. It was just, It was kind of like we didn't have a collegiate schedule. We played locally in the USA tournaments, and we practiced 3 times a week, and we didn't have good gym time, and it was a rough beginning, but I loved the sport, and the girls that played loved the sport as well, and they worked hard, and they just had fun, and we were pretty good. We were always good because in Hawaii it was all about defense. We had mostly local players, and so I think defensively we were superior to anybody else. Our ball control was good, and so we could win almost every match just based on ball control and getting the ball up and back over. And that's kind of how it started. Set 1975. I was part-time, probably made $1,500 for the season. But obviously it took me to where I wanted to go.
Right. So can you tell me about the culture of Hawaii volleyball at that time? So, it wasn't quite established collegiately yet. Title IX passed in 1972, and that took quite a long time to actually get women into collegiate sports as in an official capacity where there were competitions regularly and whatnot. So can you tell me about maybe just the culture of what Hawaii volleyball was then?
Well, we had a team in 1974. They went to the nationals. It was the AIAW, and I think they got second or third. And so I took over the next year. In 1975, Title IX was kicking in, and there were actually 3 mainland girls that came to Hawaii on scholarship. I think they just got tuition, but that was a kind of the start of the program, and we combined them with some local players. And one player, a local player in particular, was Terry Maltaire. At the time, huge middle blocker at 5'11", and
Right.
She was actually on the national team, but she was probably a freak in Hawaii because she's so tall. Everybody else was like 5'5" and 5'4", but again, we had great ball control. 1975, we went to Princeton. It was a national championship. 24 teams were there, played a round robin. That's kind of how the national championship was held back then. And somehow we made our way through the preliminaries and got to actually the semifinals and lost in the semifinals, and then eventually got third. So that was kind of the start. And we got second the next year, and then third, and we kept knocking on the door, but we couldn't break through because we didn't have the size in the middle, especially. And that's where kind of Diane Pestolacy, who you're gonna have her husband on, but she came into the program and she was legitimate. She was 6'2". We finally had enough firepower and size in the middle to match up with some of the better players on the mainland and better teams. And so in 1979, we had a really good team. We had a bunch of little kind of ball control players, but we had 2 legitimate middles, and we won the national championship, and all of Hawaii just went nuts.
Right.
Yeah, it was on TV. And so that was kind of the start of the big following that we eventually had, still have to this day. And it's just been a wonderful ride for volleyball in Hawaii. Now the men have won 2 straight. So I would say this is the volleyball state. I mean,
right.
Where else like it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, it's just, it's been a pleasure for me to be involved in this, just give people something to hang on to. Everybody kind of identifies with volleyball now, men's and women's. And, even in the outer islands, I mean, you're from Hilo, and Hilo is just crazy for volleyball as well. And, it's just, it's been a wonderful ride with just the rise and the popularity of volleyball all over the country now, where it just kind of started on the West Coast. There were only West Coast good teams, and but now it's just a totally national sport.
Would you say that the powerhouse of Hawaii volleyball and what it is and what it's known for today was predicated on that 1979 national championship?
Well, certainly we had notoriety now. So we won the national championship. We were able to recruit more on a national basis, and we started getting better players. And, it was, and I think part of the key was that we had great local players. We had really good players that could, they didn't want to go away, so they usually would stay home, play for the local university. And the program was good enough or it was attractive to them. And so, you know, with a mixture of some good mainland players with some really great Hawaiian local players,
Mhm.
we managed to stay on top or near the top for many, many years.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of how Hawaii teams have always been. They have a very strong core of local girls with ball control, and then a sprinkling of more larger, larger in size girls, taller
Yeah,
girls.
you're
They just
larger
get
in
taller
size.
year over
Yeah,
year. But I was the exception, right? There's not many tall girls in Hilo.
you were one of the exceptions, and you know, being 6'2" and an outside hitter. I mean, most 6'2" girls back then were definitely middles, and you were an outside hitter with a great arm swing, and so that was a rarity in itself. And being from Hilo, a small town, and you
Right.
know, your story in itself is amazing. So
Right. It is special. You know, that team was special. I was, you know, the next tallest person on the team was maybe 5'7". So the fact that all six of our starters ended up getting D1 scholarships to a school was just that it's a legacy in Hilo, that team that my senior year that we had. But getting back to your coaching journey. So who would you say, I mean, you've been coaching since 1975. Right? Or was it before that you were coaching basketball? What was it that inspired you to become a coach? And why did you want to become a coach? And who was it that inspired you as your coach, possibly?
well, I always give credit to my college coach who brought me into the sport, and I pattern a lot of my early coaching, I guess, strategies and just philosophies based on what he was doing. His name is Dennis Berg. He's still a really close friend of mine. One of his daughters on the Olympic team 3 times. That's Lindsay Berg, and his other daughter is the head coach today at Santa Clara. So
Oh,
just a volleyball family, volleyball, you know, people that just, you know, I've been very close to over these last almost 50 years now. You know, and the other one, more of a contemporary guy, is Chris McLaughlin, who uh, was a very successful, was a very successful volleyball and basketball coach here in Hawaii at Punahou School. And he was kind of always a little bit ahead of me as far as what he was doing in the sports. And so I looked up to him because here's a guy my age, but he had already attained a lot of success at the high school level. So I really took a lot from him. We're still close today. He does broadcasting for the Wahine and the men's volleyball matches. But I would say those 2 guys kind of shaped my career early on.
and continuing, just piggybacking off of that. So throughout your entire coaching career, would you say you had a tight team of people that kind of helped you along your path from then till now? Let's just label it your team within a team. So who were those people and what did they do for you as far as helping you become a successful coach and helping
Well,
you see the bigger picture?
Yeah, the team within the team, I think, changed over the years. And early on, it was, again, very Spartan. We had a trainer, and I don't even remember her name, but those kind of people, trainer, weight training coach, just the AD was Donis Thompson, who had a lot to do with Title IX. Those were the people that were in on the ground floor. And so I think back, and, you know, obviously you need help, and I needed help, and I was a good volleyball guy, but I wasn't very good at other things administratively. So I got a lot of help back then. And then I think back to my colleagues who was coaching at maybe Andy Banikowski at UCLA, and Mike Hebert was back in Illinois, and Russ Rose, and these kinds of guys. We would get together and just talk volleyball, and it wasn't a very advanced sport at the time. And so we would get a lot of ideas from each other. We would try to pick each other's brain all the time. And so those, I don't know if that's the question you had in mind, but those are kind of the people that shape me as a coach. Because if you try to do it alone, you're just
Oh,
not
there's
gonna,
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's just no way anymore. You need a lot of help. And so for any of those young new coaches, build yourself a great staff and learn from them, and they can really help you.
That's great. So throughout your time, did you have a mission statement or a vision statement and your core values? So let's just talk about those briefly and kind of what they were, how they changed over time, but something that kind of held you true to yourself as far as who you wanted to be as a coach.
Well, I think you mentioned it, but it changes constantly. It's still changing. And my son-in-law is a football coach, and I watch what's going on in the landscape of college athletics. Is so different now, even from 5 years ago. And so I think young coaches need to be ready for change and to be on the lookout for what's successful, what works and what doesn't work. But getting back to maybe our mission was, my mission was like, first of all, I'm a really competitive guy. So part of my mission was to win. I wanted to win, and I think I pushed my teams to win. Maybe that's not at every level you should strive for, because there's certainly other levels that you don't have to win. I think in Division I, I think you have to win. Yeah. But Division III, some Division II, and there's some other qualities. And one of those things that I always try to do is try to give my players just a great experience in college. And part of that was winning at Hawaii, because that's why you came here. You wanted to win. But then part of it too is, you need academic success. And so you have to be able to provide that for players and student athletes. You want your players to grow as people. And how that gets done is, a number of ways. I can't really list all of them, but they need to be better people when they leave your program than when they came in.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so that's something that is always in the back of my mind. And to prepare them for the future. When they leave the program, obviously you want them to be better people, but you want to be have them prepared for the rest of their life, or maybe some qualities about going through your program that might help them in the future. I know we always say this, but obviously it's true. If you can get through 4 years of college and working hard on a team and persevering the ups and downs. College athletics is a bunch of ups and downs. It's not all fun and games, it's tough times. And so when you get through that, I think that prepares you, for your first job. Your first job might not be what you wanted, but you've gone through that already, and that's going to help you. So that was kind of always in the back of my mind, to provide a great experience, for the student athletes.
Absolutely. And referring to the culture of Hawaii volleyball again, so it's already known that Hawaii volleyball, even what it is now, is very much a part of, it's a familial, there's Ohana, there's the boosters, there's the fans. They all coalesce to become what Hawaii is and why it's so special. How, as a coach, have you fostered that culture? Like, what conditions do you create as far as engagement on your teams with fans and boosters to kind of create that tight-knit culture?
Well, I think you are correct in that the fans in Hawaii, it's almost a way of life for some people. I've had numerous people come up to me and say, my grandmother just at 7:00 on game day has to watch, and everybody has to watch. And so that was kind of the culture that I love to foster, because it got everybody involved. And I think I heard some fact that it was like 300,000 people watch Wahine volleyball on TV every night out of what, 1 million people in the state. So that made me feel really good. And, you know, when you win, everybody feels good, and get up the next morning, you want to go to work and you're happy. And so that made me happy to win and to have people involved, people, you know, just happy for your success. And you know, it's continued to this day. We still on live TV every match, the Wahine volleyball program and the men. So we've kind of created that culture of volleyball people, and it's still big news in Hawaii, especially after the men have won 2 straight championships now.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that, you know, when I look back, I'm really proud of that we were able to create that. The attendance, we were number 1 in the country for many years. I think we're still number 2. Nebraska's done really well at the gate, but we've actually made money for the program, which is another thing that it's a rarity in college athletics.
Right.
Yeah, but we were grossing somewhere like $1.3 million on the gate over the course of some years. And so that was another kind of feather in our cap, that we were able to, you know, provide financial stability for the program. And so the attendance, the money making, we did a lot of public service things. We did a lot of public appearances. And so you have to foster that. It just doesn't happen. Go out and create that kind of thing. And we were able to do that. Yeah.
As someone that's played for you and in that program, I can attest to that we were active. So I before Hawaii, I played at Oregon, and we didn't have much of a following at Oregon. We were kind of, you know, on the upswing. And what I can say, there was a stark difference in culture between University of Oregon volleyball and Hawaii volleyball. University of Oregon is a big school known for its football, but the other sports don't get as much attention because it wasn't intentional. We didn't intentionally promote volleyball. We weren't active within our community. We weren't held to a standard of social excellence like we were at University of Hawaii, because we carried, as a player there, you carry the weight of your fans. You're getting attention everywhere you go. Everyone knows who you are. You're in the newspapers, you're in magazines that are circulating throughout Hawaii. You're on the news every night, even after practice, news want to interview you, and we're on TV playing every week. And that was intentional. That culture and what Hawaii volleyball was created and instigated by you. And so what I want to say is that it's amazing how you have built that culture to what it is now. And I just think that as coaches, we have to be intentional about that and how we engage with our fans, how we engage with booster clubs, because it all makes a difference. If we are continually going after it, then you can grow your program exponentially when you are intentional about it.
Yeah, what I have to say about that, Sarah, is that coaching, especially the head coach, a lot of young guys and girls want to get into it because they love volleyball and they want to get in the gym and train and do this and teach the techniques, and that's all fine and dandy. But there's a lot of other stuff that go with it, and a lot of young coaches, they don't know that. They think they're going to be in the gym the whole time, and I would say 80% of it is doing what you just described, you know, being in the community and doing the academics and the weight training, and there's a lot to it. But the public service and the public just media obligations and are just tremendous. So take care of that stuff too, because that's what's going to make you successful in the long run.
Absolutely. I love it. So for coaches, how do you suggest, what are some tactics that they can do as far as if they don't have media involvement yet? How can they go about that? How can they go about growing their program? Kind of similar to how Hawaii did.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to get out there.
Mhm.
You have to get out there. You have to invite the media to your practices, your games. You may even have to write the story and send it in.
Mhm.
In some places they won't send any media to the game, and so you may have to write something up. I mean, most of them will publish it if it's well written, and but you just got to grind. You got to find out where people will accept you and go from there. But it's not an easy task. I think every city and every little town is a little bit different. So find out what works and just try to get people to the games. The kids, if you get the kids there, the parents got to drive them. So a lot of it comes from summer camp, running camps, and inviting the kids to play. And if the kids want to go, the parents got to go too. So that's another way to get the community involved. But I don't think there's any magic potion. You just gotta get out there and grind and
That's great.
just work hard at it.
Good, great advice. So we will go into kind of your volleyball IQ and things that our coaches can learn from as far as volleyball systems and different skills can go. Just like to pick your brain on what you think is most relevant. So Hawaii volleyball systems. So can you briefly tell me about, I know it changes year over year depending on the lineup, but in general, like Hawaii volleyball systems, the offense and defense, what sticks out? What are the most important components?
Tough question, Sarah, but I think we all have to be adaptable to our talent. That's the one thing that pops up. If you got players that are maybe bigger, slower, slow twitch kind of things, but good volleyball players, you may have to be in an offensive system that goes high. I remember playing USC, and they used to set the ball to the ceiling because they had these big 6'4" outside hitters, and they needed a long approach and long arm swings. And so I think you just have to take what you got and look for it. But I remember back, we had a great team. I think it was 87 or somewhere in the 90s. But we had Kanoe Kamanao coming in, and you played with her, but she came in as a freshman and she was really talented. And so our team wasn't great. We had a smallish team. So we went real fast, fast to the pin, fast to the back. And we were 30-0 in her freshman year going into a regional, and only because people couldn't catch up to our offense. So, and I know Karch at the USA team, they're real fast too. Mm-hmm. Most of the world plays real fast now. It's just so much of an advantage, but you have to have good passing, and you have to have a great setter, and your outside hitters have to be real fast twitch, get to the ball quick and hit quick. So I'd rather play fast. It's mm-hmm. much more exciting, and you create a lot of opportunities for your hitters. But if you got real lanky kind of high ball hitters, then you got to go with that. The one thing that we instituted later in my career was putting your best hitter as the opposite. That way, that opposite doesn't have to pass, so she doesn't have to be a great passer. She can stay in the game. But to always have that backside high ball was really big. It's so big in international ball now, but mm-hmm. back, I don't know, we had Nikki Taylor as a freshman, and we instituted that, and we ended up beating Texas in the first match of the year. They couldn't defend it. They didn't know how to defend it, and a lot of teams still can't defend the high back, right, because all stacked in and try to sit, block the middle with two people. But then if you have a backside, it really helps. So that's the way international ball is now. Mm-hmm. but I would always have my best hitter nowadays. Unless it's a smaller hitter, if the player has size, I think the right side would be something critical to the success of a team.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
That about sums it up. I mean, I know even just from season to season playing with you, we always adjusted based on the strengths of the lineup. And, I think from my era, the opposite was just starting to bloom. That wasn't a prominent position as it is now in volleyball today. So referring to that, just, the game changes constantly. It seems like it's just at an exponential rate now. It's changed so much, which is from the time that I was playing 15 years ago to what it is now. What do you think, instigated that whole prominence of the opposite position, just in reference to an offensive system?
Well, I think it was because we had great hitters, anyway, on the international level, but they couldn't pass. And so it happens a lot now in American college volleyball.
Mhm.
Our great hitters don't pass. The great outside hitters don't pass, but they get taken out because the American rules say that you can substitute 14 times or whatever it is now.
Uh-huh.
And so a big left side hitter doesn't have to stay in the back row, can come out, put a little defensive specialist in. That's kind of my, I don't know, pet peeve, that we don't develop these kinds of players.
Right.
You as a big left side hitter stayed in and passed.
Right.
Because you could pass, but only because you worked at it. And, I would say I gave you the opportunity. I wouldn't just say, oh, you're big, you can't pass, you come out.
That's how it always was.
Yeah, that's the way it is. I watch, junior volleyball, and at the 9th grade level, they're taking out the big, goofy girl. It's like, no, leave her in. Let
It's
her
very
pass.
true. It's very true. I never had the opportunity to play back row until I came to Hawaii. 6'3", 6'2", being in Hawaii, it was automatically assumed you're big, you're tall, you can't pass, you can't play defense. Right. But it's a missed opportunity, because once you develop it, you become a very dynamic defensive player because you have range, you have reach, and I think it's
you also limit yourself as a player if you're not given that opportunity. And you don't pass, and you've got a great arm swing, you're only limited to being that opposite, because you can't stay in internationally in the back row if you can't pass as a left side player. So it's I say, coaches, stick those players out there, give them a chance, because you're going to be better in the long run. I think back in the men's side, Stein Van Tilburg was a Hawaii opposite, and then he was really great at it. He didn't pass, and so, but then we got a guy named Rado from Bulgaria, and he was a left-handed 6'8" guy, so he was a little bit better than Stein. So Stein was going to be out of the lineup, or he had to learn how to pass and stay in as a left side hitter, and that's what he did. They gave him a chance to be a passer and a defender and a left sider, and it was rough at first, but he got really good at it, and he's still playing professionally as a left side hitter. I believe plays for Denmark or Netherlands or somebody.
That's incredible.
But yeah, so, and I tell my young players, I kind of train some of them time to time, just get in the passing line and don't allow your coach to take you out. Go in there and take reps, and just beg your coach, hey, let me stay in and take the reps, because that's the way you can get better. Some of the coaches young coaches won't let the big players even take the reps. So I say, force yourself in the lineup, force yourself in the line, cut in the line, do anything you can to get more ball control. But that's the way to stay in the game too. You don't want to get taken out in the back row. That's
great. That's great advice, Dave. So regarding defense, so Hawaii is known for its defense. How did you develop that defensive, system, or just, I'd say it's more of a mentality?
Yeah, yeah, mentality is probably 50% about it. You know, you just refuse to let the ball hit the floor. And um, you know, I think you're born with that. I don't think you can just pick it up. You just have to have that desire, but you also have to have some technique. And so I know we worked a lot on just digging the ball, you know, taking the reps, hitting the floor. You know, back in the day, there was no pancake. We had to learn how to roll. So I know you being 6'3", you'd have a difficult time rolling, but I think you had to do that to just expand your area. You know, you can't just be playing defense in 4 feet. You've got to be able to go 8 feet this way, 8 feet this way,
Right.
go low, go high. And so a lot of it was just the techniques of digging balls. The system, we always played middle back deep, you know, and try to defend the tip with a line blocker or line digger. So the line digger had a lot of pressure on her to stay deep, but then react to the tip. I rarely wanted to put somebody behind the block. That takes away from your defense, and you're defending with 3 people. Nowadays, there's a lot of triple blocks, so that changes the whole dynamics of defense. Your libero has to be really mobile nowadays if you have a triple block. But most international teams triple block left and right, even in the middle. And so if you're not mobile, then you give up almost a fourth of the court. So, but I think middle back defense, and I call it perimeter defense. So you kind of have a little horseshoe back there. And then, you know, the cross court is the key. I think the libero or the left back has to be inside the block, moving towards the middle for any kind of touch balls off the net or off the block. You know, and then along with defense, the transition has to be worked on as well. So if you dig a ball, you know what's going to happen. You know what, you have an outlet. If it's a perfect pass, you got all kinds of people involved. But if the ball is out of system, you know, what are you going to do with it? You set your left, you set your back, you set your back row. So that kind of goes hand in hand, defense to transition. And so, you know, there's all kinds of ways to do it, but I think when I look internationally, almost everybody plays middle back deep and just kind of perimeter defense.
Right. So regarding just how the game has evolved over time, I just want to briefly touch base on this, is that, you know, there's a prevalence of back row hitters now that before was non-existent. There's the prevalence of a libero now that was non-existent probably, what was it, 20, 25 years ago. And, you know, what was the need to change the game? You know, maybe you don't have the answer as far as the need to change it, but, you know, what kind of started, I mean, because you've coached through all of it. You've coached through all of the transitions of volleyball from when it was nothing to what it is now. So just briefly touch base on the evolution of volleyball.
Well, the players now are so physical. It changed the game. It allowed the back row attacker to be relevant. You know, I mean, you could have been a really good back row attacker, but we just never thought about it. We just didn't think it was effective. But the players now, you know, when you take off at 10 feet, but you land at 4 or 5 feet, so you're hitting the ball just like a front row player. I mean, that's huge now. The bic or the pipe, what they call in men's volleyball, is almost unstoppable. I watch a lot of men's volleyball, and it's really hard to defend. Essentially, you have 5 hitters all the time. You have a back row, pipe, or bic. You have your opposite on the right. You've got your middle is running quick in the middle, and then you got your left. So the offenses are way far advanced. And so just because physicality of the players now, I would like to see them move the attack line back. You know, maybe 12, 13 feet to take the dominance of the back row players away. I mean, you still have it, but it wouldn't be a slam dunk. I mean, if you watch our USA men's team, it's probably 90% kill percentage on the BIC. I think that's too high. I think that's too many ways to try to defend. Anyway, this is kind of a sidelight here, but
oh, it's great. I actually want you to elaborate on these things because, you know, the game has changed so much and coaches are trying to adapt. And along with change comes rule changes, you know, and that's also where the libero comes in too. That was it totally changed the game, you know, so.
Yeah, the libero is, it's been a boon, I think, to just the game itself, because you either had in international, your big 6'10" middle had to stay in, and they couldn't dig a ball to save their life. And so there were very less rallies would happen. And sometimes they had to pass and they couldn't pass. And so the institution of the libero was huge for just ball control and just better game. You know, my one son, Eric, was a libero for the USA. He was, you know, he wouldn't be in the game today. You know, so it's a whole new like profession for
right.
These smaller players. They don't have to be small. Some of the liberos around the world are 6'2", 6'3", but you have to have a lot of range. You know, internationally, you can't be 5'4". Your range is so small that you wouldn't be successful. But it's been a really helpful thing. You know, in college, NCAA, all the colleges are using libero, as well as a bunch of DSs. So there is a place for a smaller player in the game. And I think that's exciting. You get more people involved. You know, I'd like to see the American colleges, though, cut back on the substitutions, just for the sake of trying to develop some more well-rounded players rather than take everybody out in the back row. And but there's two sides of that. You know, you want to give opportunities to younger or smaller players. So I see the value in both ways. But yeah, the libero has been, you know, a boon to our sport. Oh, I might add though.
Yeah.
When that libero thing came in, we had Angelica Ljungqvist, who was a Swedish player for us, and she was amazing in the back row. And then she played back row all the time for us. And then the next year she went pro after she graduated and went to a pro team. And she called me like the first month and said, "Dave, they're taking me out of the back row. I don't get to play the back row. They put this libero in." And she was so upset because she could play back row, you know, and now she had to come out all the time, and she was really upset about that.
I'm sure a lot of middles were, at least the ones that enjoyed the back rows.
Well, Suzanne Agee in the 87, I think, 87 team, you know, she stayed in. She was really good back row. She could pass. She was in the formation. And so that would never happen today. But, you know, some of the big middles could pass.
Right. I think that just goes back to giving them an opportunity to expand and have reps and, you know, be defenders. I remember when I was, you know, I played middle most of my high school. I played outside. I was a natural outside, played middle because of my size. I would get subbed out in the back mostly, but when I would get in, I would be fearful. I would be like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't even pass. So, you know, it was one of those scenarios where you just have to give your hitters a chance to develop their defense. So I think, you know, the libero position is totally changed the game of volleyball. Just in terms of being able to like you said, have more rallies, just with the implementation of having more defensive specialists and defensive players on the court. It keeps the game a little bit more interesting. And I also want to talk about blocking too, in terms of defense and how that kind of has changed over time. There's been many, techniques like the swing block that tend to be overemphasized in terms of execution. And what are the most important components of that blocking?
Well, I was one of probably the last big time and big school kind of coaches to implement swing blocking. When it first came out, I felt like everybody was a little late on the technique, so they wouldn't get over. They had to speed up the process of swing blocking. So we kept our outside blockers with just kind of a two-step move and then up. I get the swing block. I get that you can get higher. I think if you work at it from an early age, it's obviously the way to go now. If you can get 2 or 3 inches higher, obviously you take more court away from the hitter. So that's what happens now. And but I really, I watch the middle blockers, and there are a lot of times when you can't swing block because the offense has put pressure on you and you're late and you're trying to close. So the middle blocking technique is a little different. Where you put your hands when you're late, Mike Seeley and I had these conversations about, he helped me for 4 years, but instead of trying to get square when you're late as a middle blocker, he liked, and we both try to adopt this, where you put your hands into the seam and try to slow it down rather than try to bring it back to the middle. Then when you try to bring it back, you create a hole. And so the hitter has pretty good success with a little seam in the block. So try to plug up the seam as well as try to get over at the same time. So it's a beautiful thing when it works.
It is.
Obviously you get used a good amount of time, but if you don't close it at all, you have no chance.
Right.
So what you're hoping to do is to try to get a touch, and the ball goes high, we can play transition. The end blockers, I think, is a matter of tactics. Like, what are we going to do with this hitter in front of me? Are we going to take line? Do we take line and then drop in? Or do you just set up inside and give that person the line? And a lot has to do with scouting. You want to know what the favorite shot is of that person over there.
Would you rather have your block take away their strong hit or have the defense defend that?
In men's volleyball, you got to take away the shot with the block, because there are not too many digs. If the ball goes by the block, it's probably not coming back. The guys are so strong now. In women's volleyball, it might be a good idea to give that person, like if someone's a really good cross-court hitter from the left, I might give it to her and just let our great defender just dig.
Right.
Unless the girl's hitting the ball at 80 miles an hour, then you probably don't want to do that. But if she's diggable, then maybe it's good not to let the block get tooled. So that's a good point. I kind of think it's just depending on the scouting report, what you want to do. But I was going to say the hands on the end blocker just have to be so solid. If you press over, the guys and girls too now at the international level hit the ball so hard. If your hands aren't well formed and over the net and really tight and strong hands, and that ball's going to hit and go out of bounds every time. So that's something I would work on, just tightening up your hands, having the your hands at the right width. You know, they can't be real close and they can't be letting a ball fly through your hands, but if they're strong and your fingers are strong, you might slow it up. It might go into play. And so I would work on just trying to press over with the shoulders and be tight, have strong hands, and you still may get used, but chances are you slow it down or even block it. You know,
That's
you know,
great
block it,
advice.
the easiest point to get. You know, if you can block it straight down. So
Absolutely.
blocking, I would say, Sarah, that blocking was the hardest thing to teach. And if you don't watch a lot of film of yourself blocking, you have no idea. You just
Right.
don't know what you're doing up there. You think you're doing something, but you're not. So do some film work with your blockers, show them the hand position, show them what you want. Because just to tell somebody how to block it just doesn't happen. You know, it's a lot of actual on court kind of stuff, but
Because
it's a
a
really
lot of
hard,
it is instinctual too. You know,
a lot of it is, and if you don't have it, it's hard to learn it. You know, it's
Right.
hard. Yeah,
because it's a lot of it is just reading. You got to your volleyball IQ and your perception, your familiarity with the game contributes to that skill. Because
and
when you
a lot
watch
of
the
it is,
game, you can read people, you can read the pass, the set, and you can kind of, you know, predict where the ball is going to go, which increases your chance of having a well-formed block.
that's a whole new story. You know, anticipating where the setter, reading the setter. There's so much to that, but a lot of it's timing. I mean, sometimes you on a high ball. That's why high balls a lot of times are successful because the block can't time. You know, they have a hard time tracking and then going when they're supposed to go. So a lot of times you get people way early and they're coming down. That's why a high ball hitter has success. You're either late or early sometimes, but the key is kind of as a blocker to watch the hitter and go just after the hitter jumps, you jump. You can't jump at the same time as the hitter. So there's a lot to blocking. You know, it's difficult.
Great. I want to touch base too on setting. You have coached some of the greatest setters, and a lot of Olympic setters have come through our program there, and all-American setters. Would you say that's a matter of recruitment or just the way Hawaii teaches or emphasizes this skill set?
I don't know if you believe this, but the girls in Hawaii just have, I call them lovely hula hands because they just have great hands. And
This
you
is
experienced that with your St. Joe team. And, you know, we had so many good Hawaiian setters. And I don't know if it's a natural thing. Nothing really is natural, but somehow the girls that came to our program, they could always sit. You know, they had great hands. They had great touch. I don't know if it came from the parks and the beach.
I do believe this. I do.
Yeah.
There's an ease to setting just in the skill and the flick of your hands that comes very natural to Hawaii players.
I can name you half a dozen great setters that came through our program. And then one that didn't come through was Lindsay Berg, who's on 3 Olympics teams, and she grew up here. But you played with one of the girls who had the best hands ever. That was Kanoe Kamanao. You know, I didn't teach her any of that. She just came and she said, boom. I think the first one was Nahaku Brown, who played in the late 70s. But she was one of the Hawaiian girls, I would say. Just was unbelievable. But the setting, you know, nowadays.
And your son Kavika is a setter as well.
Yeah, my son Kavika is a setter. He was on 2 Olympic teams, and you know, but he didn't grow up as a setter. He always had to hit because he didn't have enough hitters on his club team or his high school team. So he was always hitter slash setter. And it's amazing the things that he's accomplished in his career as a setter. Never had the greatest hands, but he just, that's the other thing. You don't always have to have great technique as long as you get the ball in a good location. He was able to do that. And, he didn't, like I say, he wasn't a great athlete, good athlete, but not great. And good hands, but not great hands. But good location, that was the key. If you can have good location, you don't have to have a beautiful set ball. As long as the hitter can hit the ball in a good position. So, but nowadays, the one thing I would say about setters that they really need to learn how to go a long way, which I call a long way. So if the ball takes you over to the left side, then you set back, and you've got to perfect that, because the blockers will start cheating on you if you can only go the easy way, the closest way. The blockers will figure that out, and they'll just be set up on your hitters. So I was watching the USA women's team last night. Carlini, the American setter, she went long almost all the time, and I like that in a setter, but you got to be able to do it accurately. You can't just do it. Yeah. So if the ball carries you to the right side pin, probably the best set is to go long to the left, that kind of thing. So,
and what is the importance of jump setting?
Well, I think the jump set, and I taught it at an early part of my career too, because the ball just gets to the hitter faster. And so the higher you take it, the faster you can make it, the quicker it get to the hitter, less chance the block will be formed. So, as a young setter, like 12, 13, 14, the girls aren't strong enough to do that. So obviously you have to work on, legs and pushing the ball out. But as you get older and stronger, I think that the jump set technique has to be introduced. Maybe 15 years old, 16, you start getting strong enough. But it definitely is probably the only way to do it. Get up, get the ball out fast, get your hitter a chance to put the ball down. So, but you have to do it at the right time. They have to be strong. The girl or the guys have to be strong enough to just set with their hands.
That's great advice. Now we're going to talk about serving. So with the implementation of rally scoring, do you see the serve as an offensive tactic or a defensive tactic?
That's a great question. I've said this before today, but I watch a lot of men's volleyball. And it's really frustrating for me as a women's coach who, Karch banned, I think is the right word, banned the jump spin serve because of the low percentage of, he didn't like the percentages, whether it was 50-50 or 75-25, he didn't like it. So all of his players jump float because of the just bad percentage keeping the ball in. But if you watch men's volleyball, it's so aggravating, and it's all over the world. It's in college volleyball. I guess the philosophy with a lot of coaches, create opportunities, get some easy points, just go up and rip the jump serve. But I'd be interested in a study maybe of how many points are scored with a float as opposed to the jump spin. I guarantee you the jump spin has way lower percentage being in. And it's just kind of me. I just can't stand 23-23 and you're trying to win the game and boom, in the net.
I know how much you don't like service errors. So
yeah. It's just I'm more like Karch, in his philosophy rather than most of the men around the world, men coaches. And my boys say, Dad, you can't serve easy.
Mhm.
I'm not saying a jump float is easy. I've seen people struggle with a jump float,
Mhm.
but they're defending the jump spin and how many errors. And I mean, I watch UCLA men over the course of this past season and seasons past, but you know, they got 23, 28 service errors in a match. That's a whole game, you know.
Right.
So and the USA team served poorly at the Olympics in Tokyo,
Mhm.
and you know, it's just kind of at the critical times. I think the ball needs to be in play.
This is true.
Yeah.
I
And then
remember.
I got this little thing. I mean, I think we used to go by the something, how many sins of serving, and a
Right.
lot of it was like never serve after a timeout, or never serve
Right.
out a timeout, and never serve out a game ball, or never serve out on a match ball. And you know, you had these old time rules when you just can't miss a serve. Now I think
They still
sometimes,
exist today.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's kind of like it's almost like a superstition. The server still feels it, you know. They still have that pressure. Um, but yeah, I happen to agree with you, because just through my own experience, I was a jump server. I don't know if you remember. I was a jump spin all throughout Oregon. I had a high success rate, but also a high error rate. I had the most aces per game, but you know, in the Pac-10 at that time. But then when I came to Hawaii, we changed it to a jump float. And it was at Hawaii I got coined Ace and Mason, because of the way that we changed my jump float serve. It was actually more effective, not just in getting aces, but you know, getting their system out. I mean, their defense out of system, because you have more accuracy with the jump float. You're able to, you know, target areas on the court a little more accurately.
yeah. The other thing about you being a taller player and the jump float, it's actually coming at a different angle. You know,
Mhm.
most players would serve up and over, and so maybe it's easier to get in front of it and pass. But if you're like you jumping, maybe you jump 18 inches, but it's coming flatter, and sometimes it's even coming down as a float, is really hard to handle. So
Mhm.
I like jump float flat, you know, catches people up here, hard to pass. And I'm an advocate of jump float, you know, hard, flat jump float, not a glooper free ball type, but actual being aggressive with a jump float. And you're going to miss a few too, but you're not going to miss as many as a jump spin.
Right.
But you create opportunities, you know, for your defense to play some out of system balls.
Now, prior to a coin flip, do you instruct your captains to serve or receive, and why?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that question, but you know, the percentages in men's volleyball is like 75% side out. For women, it's a little less, maybe 65. So you want to go with your percentages and probably
Mhm.
receive. You know, if you have a great server, though, sometimes it pays off to have her serve first, at least serving second, you know, putting her in a position where she rotate, your best server rotates back after the first ball, especially in game 5, when she can maybe serve twice. But I mean, I probably instructed our captains to receive.
Okay. Now, referring to statistics, right? So this is all relevant to coaching in the, I'd say, 20th, 21st century. There's an important component that technology plays now in volleyball that was non-existent in my era. And how has that helped the game? And like you said, it's totally changed. Now we can know our percentages indefinitely. And what is the, you know, like you said, serve and receive used to be, it's always serve. I remember before statistics, I felt like it was always serve, especially in before rally scoring. But How has that kind of played a role in how we adapt our game
Well,
and coaching?
yeah, with this new, I think, era of coaching, and it's called metrics. I think some people call it metrics. I call it metrics. It's creeping into every sport. It's really crept into baseball, which I watch all the time. I'm not a fan of it. I mean, everything is played on percentages. I was always a feel kind of coach. I feel like coaches need to have that quality about them. If you go by percentage every time, who needs a coach, right? You can just get a computer out there and go, this is what you got to do. So I think there's value in some of the stats. I mean, during a timeout, you want to know what the other team is going to do, or what percentage they're going to do. If they're setting this guy or this girl 80% in this rotation, then you're going to probably stack your block over there, and that's valuable. If it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 kind of thing, then again, your feel.
Right.
You got to feel what they might do. So that's part of coaching, though. You've got to have an idea. That's where a lot of young coaches, they're not good at that. They just go by percentages, and they go by what's supposed to happen, but that rarely happens, so and that's some kind of quality that you really can't teach it. I knew sports. I didn't necessarily only knew volleyball. I know baseball. I knew all the sports because that's all I ever did was do sports and watch sports. So, that's kind of what might separate the best coaches from average coaches, that they have a feel for the game and they know the game. They can predict what's going to happen, and they can guide their teams. And so, I think the metrics are good to a certain extent, but I wouldn't put all my faith into numbers.
This is true.
There's got to be some room for human kind of contribution.
Well, it goes into instincts, right? So I think, as you mentioned, it's great for, well, I think it should be a requirement. Coaches need to have good instincts. And to what degree would you balance instincts and statistics? Is there one outweigh the other?
I think if you had no idea what's going to happen, you don't know what to do, then I think you can rely on some statistics and some percentages. But then that gets to my point of just knowing the game and having a feel for the game. So I think there's no substitute for just grinding and just kind of like understanding about sports and about what's going to happen. You kind of read the other coach, you read the other players, you read the other setter, you can watch body language and try to predict. If you've got a hitter over there that's kind of moping around, well, I'm not setting that girl. I'm going to set, so you get kind of a feel for that kind of thing. And then you've got to, one of the things we didn't talk about was giving your players freedoms to do what they think is right too. A lot of times, we want to be in control. We want to tell her where to go. We want to tell her who's going to get this next set. But, a lot of times the players have good feelings, and the players themselves can understand what's going on the other side of the net. That would be an ideal thing for a coach to try to teach that to the players. Look across the net, look at the setter. What is she going to do? Or look at that hitter, as try to get a feel for yourself on the court.
Right.
That's where, like, my sons, they're really good at that. Eric and Kavika, they understand the game, and they can kind of look across and maybe predict what's going to happen. and they're just really good game. You know, you called it before volleyball IQ.
Right.
That's what volleyball IQ is like knowing what's going to go on here.
Right. So has there ever been a moment where you've felt like as a coach that someone might have had better instincts, but maybe that wasn't showing up statistically? And how do you kind of get them to perform?
Well, that's a difficult question. You want to give feedback. Yeah. I mean, you want to tell a hitter, oh, this is open, you know, try to hit this shot, or, you know, but then in the heat of the battle in the game, I mean, it might be just a little bit of a different set. And she's thinking, oh, my coach told me I got to hit this area. And then, you know, she's not successful. So again, you can give your players an idea what might happen and some percentages, and give her some, you know, I would call it coaching, but it can't be where that's the only thing they're thinking about. You know, they've got to feel too, like, you know, if it's a high ball and their block's well formed, or forget what I said. I mean, it's got to be a high kind of flat shot, try to go for a corner, you know. So again, giving your players the freedom,
Yes.
and they have to have confidence too, you know.
Right.
So we haven't talked about, they have to feel good about what they're doing out there, and just, you know, think that they're gonna get a kill no matter what. So that's a whole new ball game, you know, like sports psychology. And
yes, absolutely. That is something that it's very relevant in the 21st century. Is there's so much more information now about sports psychology and mental health of athletes. A lot of information coming out. Let's just briefly touch base on that as far as how you ensure a positive experience, positive mind, you know, being mindful of that as a coach.
Yeah, you know, early on, I think maybe early 80s, I brought this acquaintance of mine. He was a tennis guy. His name was Peter Burwash. And he was way ahead of his time in presenting kind of the mental aspect of tennis. And he wrote several books, and we got to be friends. And so I'd have him come in and talk to our teams about just how to prepare mentally and mental toughness. And so he did such a good job. And I wasn't really qualified to do any of that stuff. You know, Peter was well-versed, studied a lot about this kind of thing. And so he was really excellent with our teams. We transitioned from him, and we had this couple come in, Michael and Judy, would come in as a team. I'm not sure if they were with us when you were on the team, but so anyway, the point is we always had somebody to talk to the team, whether it was pregame, post. Most of the time it was pregame, you know, how to calm yourself, how to do this in this situation, how to react when you just made an error, those kinds of things. And so I think it's huge now. I think players have just so much to think about. Their mental toughness is
right.
It just doesn't happen all the time now. You have to prepare, and you have to understand what's going on. And so I think almost all teams now, college teams, pro teams, you know, have a psychology. I don't know if it's psychology or just a mental preparation. I'm sure I was watching a lot of tennis last week in the French Open, but it seemed like all the players had somebody in their box that was the mental coach. And so huge now. It's just the players just they just don't have the capacity to just do this on their own. You know, they have to have something, you know, that's in their mind, or something they're working on, something that's going to help them in the heat of the battle. So
absolutely. I think it all goes into just society now. There's a lot of external pressures and information is accessible, and sometimes you are hearing or dealing with stuff mentally that you don't even want to deal with because it's just there. It's always there. With the influence of social media and the news, and just there's a larger presence of technology in society today that has affected how athletes cope with everyday stressors. Before it was like, okay, I'm a student athlete. I go to school and I play, and that was it. And it was easy to just be that. Now it's, I'm a student athlete. I'm worried about my following, getting an NIL deal, or, this racial riot is happening and I'm a person of color, and, all these things that are so much pressure. And, it's a whole nother aspect of sports that needs to be dealt with and addressed.
It's another course you can teach.
It totally is. And, I just think it's very relevant to coaching now. And like you said, I think it's imperative to have professionals or people that can assist you along that process. Wrapping up, I have a closing question, which is, what is the future of volleyball? How do you see the game progressing? Do you see a professional league in America, a sustainable professional league happening anytime soon?
Funny you should ask. I'm actually involved. I was involved quite heavily, but I kind of stepped back a little bit. But there is going to be a professional American league soon for women. There is one now going on. It's called AUP, Athletes Unlimited. That format, some people like it, some people don't like it. But the league I'm talking about will actually have cities and teams in cities and competing against other teams. So that will start in 2024.
Wow.
They're working really, really hard on it. There should be some announcement very, very soon about the league. It's called Love Volleyball, LOV.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about my organization after, but my organization is called First Love Volleyball.
But Tom Pesto is involved as well, so you can ask him about it. But the future for volleyball, Sarah, is just so huge right now. It's the fastest growing sport. More girls play volleyball than any other sport at the high school level. I think they added something like 20 men's collegiate volleyball teams in the last 2 or 3 years. So men's volleyball, even though it's still limited, it's growing as well. Our national teams are thriving. The women won the gold. Mm-hmm. We have so much depth in women's volleyball right now. It's just unbelievable. So we just have to get more exposure on the national level.
Right.
Men's volleyball got very little coverage this year on the national level. Women's way much more, but girls want to play and girls want to watch it, and so the future is just.
And they don't always want to go overseas. I
mean, though we have so much depth on the high level. There's so many good college players now that there's got to be somewhere for these girls to play again. But I'm just talking mainly the growth of the game and the growth of the sport. And so many girls are playing. You go to these national tournaments, there's 700 teams, and so the future is just so bright for American volleyball. It's just, I can't even predict it from where we started back in the 70s. It's just incredible.
I know, and you've been around and you've been at the helm of all of it. So it's really great. Thank you so much, Dave, for interviewing. I'm going to stop recording for a minute. Let me see.